It's IB Nation Sports Talk, and we're up and rolling on a Thursday. Glad to have you with us. He's Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. We were looking like we were going to have a rain delay for a little bit, or maybe a rain out for a little bit.
Yeah, I was thinking rain out, and then I looked down at my phone again, and I was like, "Oh, this thing's happening."
That's what I always hated when I was doing baseball games. Once it started raining and you got the delay, it's like, all right, let's just cancel this thing. Let's go home. I don't want to sit here for the rain delay. Let's just go home.
Could have been a doubleheader tomorrow.
I know. If you were watching in Brian and Vince's big show earlier today, you probably got kicked out like everybody else. There was a big issue apparently with the host site, that like the platform that hosts all these all the video streams, and it
People
crashed.
probably think we don't have a show right now.
Yeah, there might be. Now, an alert gets sent out whenever a new show, like when a show gets scheduled and that kind of thing. And I think another one gets sent out when it starts, but I don't know. It's hard to say. I was trying to get this show scheduled at around 3:30. That's when I usually post it. And mighty Streamyard took a dive, wouldn't let me in, and it kicked Vince and Brian out. So here we are. We're like I said, we're up and rolling. So that's all we can ask for, I guess, at this point. DJ said YouTube did send the alerts on time. So there we go. Good to know. Thank you very much, sir. It's we in, we out day. And once we in, we out, well, our Champions Lounge subscribers submit their questions in we in, we out form on the Champions Lounge, and then we answer them right here. So, without any further ado, from Lou Holt's grandson, what if it's really Lou Holt's grandson? We in, we out. Notre Dame's independent status gives it unmatched scheduling flexibility and national relevance. Ditching it would dilute the program's identity.
Yeah, I'll be in on this one. I think that Notre Dame being independent gives them the flexibility that they need in terms of scheduling, but also the national relevance that they were talking about. There's a reason why Notre Dame is kind of known as the Subway. I forget the exact terminology, but like
Subway alums,
and that's something that they want to and will always want to kind of honor, is putting these games across the country that a lot of different alums can get to, while also that it provides recruiting help as well when you can hit different parts of the country. So not being tied to a certain conference or being geographically landlocked because of a conference is definitely going to put me in the in category on this one.
Yeah, it gives all these other teams reason to complain about Notre Dame and its schedules and all the supposed advantages that Notre Dame has. And we'll get into more of that later on in the show. But yeah, it helps Notre Dame stand out, and it does continue to give Notre Dame national relevance. Nobody else has their own TV contract. They would all take their own TV contract if they could get it and make enough money out of it. They would all take the ability to go do things like the Shamrock Series around the country, set up their own games in NFL stadiums and around the world and every place else. So it absolutely makes Notre Dame stand out, and that's why Notre Dame will continue to fight to keep its independence for as long as it can. So totally in on that one. We in, we out. The relentless commercialization of college football risks turning Saturdays into another NFL product, losing the magic of college football. In or out on that? What do you think?
What is meant by commercialization? Just like the literal like
I think
commercials,
I think he's more alluding to
like the paying of
like the
players.
professionalization that's kind of not kind of, that is going on right now. I think that's kind of where he's going with this.
Hmm. I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on this one. I think this one's still kind of be to be determined, but maybe that's what the question is all about, like what we forecast will happen. Um, I'll be out on this. I still think that there's going to be. I think the level of play is still going to help distinguish Saturdays and Sundays. I think the overall still amount of like teams comparatively, like in the NFL, you only have
Yeah.
two and then in college football, you're still going to have like hundreds of teams, so or over 100 teams. So I don't know. I get what the question is asking, but I just don't think it's going to turn into like this full blown kind of NFL type scheme. Obviously, it's going to like mirror it in some ways, but I still think there's going to be some things that distinguish college football from professional football.
Absolutely. And that's kind of along what I was thinking, some of the things that you were saying there at first about the fact you do have so many more college football teams, and you can still fully distinguish a college football game from an NFL game, just the way the game is played and some other things. And like, so even though money has infiltrated the sport, like it's still the heart of the sport is still there. It's still about being on campuses and much more rabid fan bases, I think, than you have it in NFL, with NFL fan bases. And I'm not saying that NFL fan bases aren't rabid to some extent, but it's a lot different in college sports. So I think, his word is risks turning it. So I will be at least a little bit in, because it does risk it. It hasn't completely turned the sport of college football yet, but it does risk doing some of what he's talking about. And I think some of it'll be like these next probably 5 or so years are really going to be a test of that, because of the fact that we've got an expanded college football playoff. Like, what does that do to the game? I think that it's better, because at least the 12-team format was better, because of the fact that all those games, so many more games in November meant so much. You get more teams represented, and there were that many more games that mattered in the month of November coming down that home stretch and that kind of thing. And so I think that we'll continue to see that as well, because there are so many more college football teams than NFL teams. I really think that you needed to be able to involve more programs in the conversation, not just being in the playoffs, but others that had a chance to be in the playoff in November and into early December. So I do think it risks it, but again, I think that it'll really be tested over these next 5 years in terms of where things go. More so because of the revenue sharing aspect, I think, than even the NIL, personally. We in and we out. The best part of college football remains its regional rivalries and traditions, which should not be sacrificed for national playoff dreams. Tell you what, Lou Holt's grandson, very idealistic, you can tell with his questions that he's got today.
So can I be like in on the first part of this question and out on the second part? I'm in
Sure.
on regional rivalries and traditions. I'm out on which shouldn't be sacrificed by national playoff dreams. I think what they're alluding to with the national playoff dreams is kind of the way that these conferences have formed. I mean, we've already determined that college football is a cash cow, and it is going to be a cash cow. So I don't think that there should be regards for like Notre Dame and USC, for example. If you have to fly across the country, I don't think it should matter. Basically, you have the money, the resources, the time. You play once a week. It's not like you're playing a three game series or anything like
Yeah.
that. Like I'm all for keeping these regional rivalries, and I don't think that they have to be at risk because of conference realignment or the new playoff picture or sorry, the
They
new
don't have
playoff
to be, but
format.
they are. Yeah.
And so I think teams using that as an excuse is a cop out. at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's what he's alluding to. Without saying USC, it feels like he's talking about USC here because he's saying that that the rivalry shouldn't be sacrificed for national playoff dreams, and that's obviously what USC is doing. If they do indeed end up ending the series with Notre Dame, they're bailing out because they think it gives them a better chance to be in the college football playoff. Which like we had the cuts from Petros Papadakis a couple of weeks ago, just totally he played for USC. It's his alma mater. And he covers USC and college football for Fox and for radio in Los Angeles. And he's not happy about it. Like he's saying, if you can't beat Notre Dame and you got to beat Missouri State, do you deserve to be in the playoff to begin with? Probably not. So, so I'm in on this. I'm in on the spirit of what he's talking about here. We in or we out. College football's playoff expansion should include automatic bids for conference champions only, no at-large wild cards, less politics, more meritocracy.
Yes.
You're hesitating.
Well,
so basically what he's saying is none of this. The SEC, is guaranteed 4 spots. The Big Ten is guaranteed 4 spots. It's basically the 5+11 model. The 5 conference champions and then 11 at-large spots is what he's saying. Everybody should earn their way in.
Yes, I don't think that conferences should get X amount of automatic bids, and I think that if you're going to play conference championships, that you should get an automatic bid. I don't think that automatic bid should get you 1 through 5. That should get you a ticket, and wherever you fall in line, maybe that's team 16, maybe team 8, whatever it might be. I'm all for, and I'm also not on board with, like I said, the automatic. SEC gets 4, Big Ten gets 4, ACC gets 3. I think that the whole point of the transfer portal and NIL is that you're leveling the playing field, you're equalizing the playing field. And so, and we've seen that, I think, across all conferences, there's no longer kind of this disparity. And I think you can look at it and just say, all right, of the top 6 teams, 3 happen to be from the SEC, 3 happen to be from the Big Ten, 2 happen to be from the ACC. We have an at-large, maybe from the 5. Like, I'm all for that. I just don't think that in today's day and age, and I understand it's basically the Big Ten, the SEC. Well, we play harder schedules, so we should be, afforded more opportunities. But I'm not necessarily on board with that.
Yeah, and again, as we will talk about at the beginning of Rapid Fire, the Big Ten wants to tout itself as having all these tough schedules, but that's just a complete fallacy. Their schedule does not dictate that they should be getting 4 guaranteed bids just because they're the Big Ten. Like when you look at who their teams play, for the second year in a row, as we've looked through a lot of these schedules, Purdue has one of the toughest schedules of anybody in the Big Ten. It's because they're puffing up the teams at the top of the conference and feeding them Purdue and and making Purdue and some other teams in there as well take the lumps as a result. So yeah, I'm in on this as well. I don't have to repeat everything that you just said, but the best teams should be in, period. Just like the NCAA tournament, you earn your way in. There's no reason college football should be any different. We in or we out. True amateurism may be imperfect, but abandoning it wholesale in favor of financial transactions jeopardizes the educational mission and unique identity of college sports. I tell you what, these are all we're starting off from Lou Holt's grandson is the handle on the Champions Lounge. He's got a very definite theme with his questions that he's got here today. Are you in or out on that?
I'm in on this, but I don't necessarily think they're abandoning it wholesale. Maybe they are in terms of what it used to be and what it's,
Well, with the revenue sharing, you pretty much are, right?
Right. But I mean, yeah, it definitely jeopardizes the educational mission and the identity of college sports. But I don't know. I just still think that there's a way, and I think we're spoiled because Marcus Freeman does this so well. There's a way you can approach this while saying, yes, we can now give you money, but there is still other important things, aka your how you do in school, what it means to be a true college, athlete, that sort of stuff. Like, I think now more than ever, the responsibility is on these head coaches to draw the line of, okay, yes, you can get paid, but it's not going to be all about that. And some coaches aren't going to care because all they care about is getting guys and winning football games. But I think that there's a special breed of coaches like Marcus Freeman and others who truly care about, the full development of their players, and that's turning into a young adult, getting a degree so you can go on and do something after football is all said and done. Maybe you have the talent to go to the NFL, but I just think that that's on the head coaches.
Yeah, I'm out on this just simply because I think that like the educational mission, like that stopped being a priority a long time ago. That's something that the NCAA wants to plaster on your screen when you're watching March Madness and stuff like that. They've always tried to trumpet it, but they tried to have this pie in the sky attitude about amateurism and everything else for so long, and they stuck their heads in the sand. They ignored things like NIL when they could have given in on that a long time ago. We would be in a completely different place if they had. Because the reason that revenue sharing is here and the reason this lawsuit, succeeded is because the NCAA has literally been making billions with a B of dollars off the backs of the athletes who have been playing these games and, like playing these sports forever until now. And, the schools are in that as well. Look, part of the reason we're in this mess is because of the greed of the schools. And, like it wasn't enough that they were making these billions of dollars. They had to continue making more with the TV contracts and everything else. And so that's why you have 4 teams from the West Coast playing in a Midwestern conference and playing games, traveling coast to coast with their baseball teams and their softball teams and their tennis teams and everything else. So, I mean, like you can say true amateurism may be imperfect, but again, like the NCAA, like the reason we're in this mess right now is because of the NCAA and their inability to be flexible at all on any of these issues of players getting paid for decades. And it's all come back on them right now. That's why the system has blown up. T-Shoop 11, we in or we out. Notre Dame's B-plus game is sufficient enough to beat both Miami and Texas A&M, but an A-minus game will be required to win a game late in the season, probably at Pitt or Boston College.
No, I'm out on this. I don't think this is such a weird question because it's like, how do you grade performance, right? Like, to me, as long as you win, it's like really all that matters at the end of the day. But yeah, I get what they're saying. I do think talent wise, Notre Dame could be in that B plus B range and still probably be good enough to beat Miami and Texas A&M. But like, what if that means you have an A plus game on offense, but like a C minus game on defense, right? And so you're combined as like a B plus.
That's
So
your B plus, yeah.
I guess that's what I'm getting at is like, I think what this is assuming is that like offense, defense, special teams are all playing because, I mean, look at that Georgia game in the playoffs. Like, I don't think that Notre Dame necessarily played an A-level game all around, but they played, they played better in certain phases and it was enough to kind of win, right? And that's kind of how I'm viewing. I don't think an A or A minus game will be needed to beat Pittsburgh or Boston College, by the way.
Yeah.
I think you could get away with like C plus game in those and have enough talent to beat them. But I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about this question too hard. I probably am.
No, I agree with Joe. I think it's the other way around. I definitely think you need at least an A-minus game against Miami because you're going to be on the road, and against Texas A&M because it's another quality physical team, and you are going to have a quarterback who hasn't started yet. So there are going to be some questions that are going to have to be answered about him. But I think when you look at the rest of the season, I don't think once you get past those first two games, maybe USC, depending on what their offense is, like if their offense is anywhere close to what it was last year, their defense still has to improve quite a bit. But I don't really think that there is a game beyond that that's going to require Notre Dame to have an A game once you get past those three teams. So I think it's the other way around. Toonses is asking where the questions come from. They come from not your cat in your avatar. They come from the Champions Lounge. That's where the We In, We Out questions come from every Thursday. They are submitted by our subscribers on the new Champions Lounge. Andre's got a question. We In, We Out. This is the most important year for Notre Dame quarterback development because if they can show that the passing game has evolved, this will do two things. One, it will help recruit wide receivers who are on the fence with Notre Dame. And two, it'll show those next level quarterbacks who might be interested in Notre Dame to take a double take on their recruitment. In or out?
Yeah, I'm in on this, and I'll even go a little bit further. I think it's what's going to determine if Notre Dame can win a national championship. The next step for them, we saw what they did, with a really good defense and a really solid rushing attack and a below average passing attack last season. They made it all the way to the national championship, and so you add good quarterback development. That's what they're missing to win a national championship, in my opinion, is a solid stud quarterback who can air the ball out and get the ball, downfield to its wide receivers. Like Will Howard did enough with his wide receivers. Notre Dame obviously doesn't have that talented of wide receivers, so I think CJ Carr is going to have to do a little bit more work than Will Howard. But again, that's what's going to take them to the next level in terms of national championships, quarterback development, wide receiver recruiting. Winning fixes everything. And
right.
How do you win at the college level? You have a really good quarterback. It's the most important position in college and in NFL, but I think it's even more, highlighted in college just because you can get away. Like Johnny Manziel could get away with a lot of stuff because he was still playing in college in terms of skill stuff, right? And so you can get away with that sort of stuff in college as a really good quarterback. So, yes, big time in on this question.
I'm in on it as well. It's very important now because you're finally in year 4. This will obviously be year 4 for Marcus Freeman. They're going to have a homegrown quarterback. Now, obviously, they had a couple of homegrown quarterbacks in year 1, and given the chance to do that again, they would probably make a different decision on going to the, not going to the transfer portal that year. But the last couple of years, you've had more success. Even that first year, because of the fact that you had Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner, they still had some success there. But really, in all 3 years, you had to work around different deficiencies with the quarterbacks ultimately. And sometimes because of the strengths of those quarterbacks, sometimes in spite of the, whatever deficiencies they had, like look at the passing results the last couple of years, they were still able to win. But doing it with a homegrown quarterback and one who specifically can show that he can, that this is a 21st century offense and he can do special things with the football and make his wide receivers stars again. I think that that's going to be huge, both for the on-field and for the recruiting, like Andre is talking about here. So definitely in on this. Because we keep getting the questions about, will they get some flips if the passing game takes off this season? I don't see that happening. I think that it is more about the 2027 recruiting class as opposed to next year's 2026 recruiting class, where you're going to see some of the impact with passing game and some of those things. And to your point, just like you said, with winning and continuing to compete for national championships. 13 Reasons Why has a question. We in, we out. Notre Dame will surprise Miami and Texas A&M with their passing game because those defenses will focus on stopping the run.
I'll be in on this. I think if these teams are smart, they'll load up the box a little bit early, force the run to be stopped, and that should give Notre Dame plenty of, maybe man to man cover two type looks on the backside, and you want to kind of hit those early because once it's just a nice flow. You open up the passing game, that means the running game opens up a little bit. Okay, the running game closes a little bit, that means the passing game opens a little bit. And that's the surprising part about how good Notre Dame was last year is everyone knew that they were going to run the ball, but they still ran the
And they
ball
still
very.
ball. Yeah.
But I think a lot of that had to do with basically running a double or triple option at times with Riley
Yeah.
Leonard's ability to run the ball. So
Because you had multiple threats in the backfield and exactly who was going to run the ball.
Right. So even though you were loading the box, you just didn't know where and with who at the end of the day. And so that's obviously going to change a little bit this year. I think that Riley Love and obviously Jadarian Price's
Jeremiah Love
should open up.
You were combining a lot of names there. Yeah. Jeremiah Love, not Riley Love. But I get your point. I'm in on it as well. I don't know that they'll be completely surprised because remember, Notre Dame's Blue Gold game was streamed on Peacock, and I'm sure Miami coaches have watched that. So it's just like talked to the Miami reporter David Lake a few weeks back, and he said he watched it. He was impressed. So I think that it's not going to come as a complete surprise, but still, because of the fact that you've got an inexperienced quarterback, your initial strategy is going to be this is a really good run team. Those are really good running backs Notre Dame has. Take them away, make this young guy beat you with his arm, and that's what you go with until he shows that he can beat him with his arm. But I do think that he will beat him with his arm ultimately, but he's also going to have a great complement because of that run game. In or out, a strong passing game to complement the run game will make it difficult for coaches to make halftime adjustments. I mean, it's basically just kind of what we were just talking about.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily think halftime adjustments come off of, a strong passing game and that sort of stuff. Basically, halftime adjustments are based on the plays you've seen and you don't have an answer for it type situation. It's not really like a breakdown of, well, they're passing this or running this. It's, well, this run play gashed us for 20 yards 3 times. What do we need to do to cover that up? Or vice versa in the passing game, they've run this same play, maybe flipped to, field side or boundary side. And it's just, we don't have an answer for this concept. What can we do to fill in this concept? So I'll be out on it just for that reason. It's just not really halftime adjustments aren't really about breakdown of, are they passing or they're running. It's just schematically, like, do we have an answer for a play that they're running that's gashing us?
Ooh, Irish English came with stats here. Okay. So yards per pass attempt, Riley Leonard last year, 7.1. Sam Hartman in 2023, 8.9. Drew Pine, 2022, 8.0. Jack Cohn, 2021, 8.2. Ian Book, 2020, 8. Ian Book, 2019, 7.6. So the question is, Notre Dame's 2025 starting quarterback will have a yards per attempt statistic of 8.5 or higher this season. In or out on that?
It's so funny. I was literally getting ready to say, before I could see the bottom, I was like, I bet this question is going to be, where's Carr going to be? And the first number that popped into my head was 8.5, actually. So this is, I think, set really well. I'll go a little bit under, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be like 8.3, 8.4-ish. I don't think it's going to get as quite high as 8.5.
I'm shocked that Sam Hartman was 8.9 to begin with.
Oh, he likes to throw the ball.
Oh, I know he likes to throw the ball, but the fact that it was that big in comparison to these other guys surprises me a little bit. I thought it would have been more similar to Jack Cohn, to be quite honest. But I'm going to be in on this because, look, CJ Carr is still my leader in the clubhouse. And you look at how you saw in that spring game how he can throw the ball downfield. And even if it's Kenny Minchie, he's taking shots downfield. So I think that this is going to be a big number. I think it'll be over 8.5, and it could even be pushing the 9. Just under 9 that Sam Hartman had. Craig said the early blowouts helped Hartman. I think that there's probably something to that. That's probably true. Also from Irish English, if the Notre Dame USC rivalry ends, Notre Dame will be without an active, true rivalry. In or out?
I'd be out on that. Navy's always going to be an active, true rivalry.
Is it a true rivalry? Like, how do we consider, because they play them every year, I guess it meets the standard of a rivalry, right? Because, after going for so long without ever winning, they finally won some games. So they showed that they could do that. They play them every year with the exception of, like, how much of it is like how the fan base thinks about the team in terms of if it's a rival? I think I'm in on this. I think I'm in because, like, Navy is on the schedule, but I don't know that I still put them in the same category as like a USC or a Michigan, like that kind of.
So you want long-standing success, basically, like teams that, like, rivalries that have forged because you're playing good on good football.
Yeah.
Then yeah, this would be true because Navy's no good, Stanford's no good, Purdue is no good.
Well, I mean, Purdue's not going to stay on the schedule that long anyway. They're going to rotate off, and you're going to get, Michigan State here in a few years.
Until Clemson comes back, and I don't even think that could be considered a rivalry yet. It's like it's on the brink of being a rivalry.
Yeah. I think you get to about year 4 or 5. That's probably going to be considered a bit more of a rivalry because they're playing all the time. And they're both 2 national contenders. Trevor Trowbridge throwing a question in here for us today. Going highbrow. Based on the makeup of this year's roster, the schedule, the coaching staff, and the overall landscape of college football, you will be surprised, not necessarily disappointed, but surprised if Notre Dame does not make it back to the college football playoff semifinals this season. Are we in or are we out?
I'd be out on that. I would not be surprised if Notre Dame doesn't make it back to the semifinal this season. And I think there's a blanket of things that you could fall back on. Obviously, first-time starter at quarterback, new defensive coordinator, a relatively inexperienced / experienced offensive line. They're still kind of, piecing that thing together. And you never know, with the good old injury bug, how things might shake out. But I don't know. I just think with, again, the current makeup of the coaching staff, the overall landscape of football, I would be surprised if they didn't make the playoff. But going all the way down to the semis is, I still think, a very feasible task. And I don't think it's just like something you should count on every single year in and out and be surprised if that. Like, to get down to the Final Four is still really hard and a really good accomplishment. And like, that's the part. And I think this, to me, opens up a can of worms. And I really like this question because I've actually kind of like contemplated this before already. Like, I think we were so spoiled with last year's national championship appearance because that was ahead of schedule. And now I don't want there to be an expectation of.
But that's what's going to happen. Everyone's definitely going to see, because I think it will be more disappointment than
surprise.
Than surprise. Yeah.
And that's
because of the fact that they got there last year. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm
which I don't think is fair, though. Like, I don't. But as a fan, it's so hard because how do you remove yourself from that? They just went to a national championship.
Right. But now everyone assumes, oh, we're going to get back to the national championship game again. And now we're going to have a chance to win the national championship. Great if it happens. But look, no one expected Notre Dame to get to the national championship game last year. Like, especially after Northern Illinois, right? So I think it'll be more disappointment, but not surprise if they don't get to the semifinal. I'm like you. Like, to me, it's at least get into the playoff. And now we'll see how things play out over the course of the season. There's still obviously a ton of talent, including at the quarterback position, but that is still the great unknown because those guys haven't taken a legit snap yet. Like, whoever the starting quarterback is, there's still a lot to show. Still very confident, but there's still a lot to show with unproven quarterbacks.
I guess let's think about it like this though. Like, let's look at all of the teams that made the playoff last season, or maybe like the Final Four, and do a comparison. What team, like, for example, Ohio State. I actually feel like Notre Dame's in a better spot than Ohio State going into this season because Ohio State lost so much to the draft and they just won a national championship. And then it's like, okay.
But Ohio State's also got a cupcake schedule.
Right. But then you look at a team like Georgia and you're like, well, did they really get better? Did Texas get better? Did Penn State get better? I think Penn State is one of those teams where I feel like they could be better next season, ultimately. So this is a really tricky question. I think my expectation for Notre Dame is to be in the playoff and to probably win the first round game. Anything after that, I think, or, I guess anything after that would be cherry on top. Anything before that would be a disappointment. Like losing in the first round, not making it at all. And I say all this now, but I know once Notre Dame makes it and wins the first game, I'd be like, well, if they lose here, I'm going to be pissed.
Here we go. Like semifinal. Yeah. Championship.
So it's just so hard to say these things and remove yourself when you have so much emotion kind of tied to the thing.
Like Toonsa says, Ohio State's also replacing both coordinators, but they still recruit well. They've still got, a bunch of studs. They've still got Jesse's guy, Julian Sayin, just saying, over there. But he's got a lot to prove as well. But he's going to have a lot of talent around him. But yeah, like Joe's saying, Indiana will drop. I think the teams that are going to drop this year: Indiana, SMU, Boise State.
Arizona State.
I'm not sure about Arizona State's got a ton back, including the quarterback. Like their biggest
and
loss,
momentum.
Yeah, their biggest loss is Scattaboo. And so like how do they replace that since he was such a big part of their offense? But and like it's not like there's another great team in the Big 12. I've seen Kansas State already picked at the top of the Big 12 this year. I don't know. But like to your point, what you're like, a lot of people very high on Texas and Penn State. Everyone's always going to be high in Ohio State. Everyone's always going to be high on Georgia. But Penn State is going to have a great chance to be a higher seed simply because of their schedule, which we'll get into more in a little bit as well.
I think ultimately what will dictate kind of the way this next college football playoff shakes out is what the SEC does. I think that's a big proponent. I think, is Alabama going to be back? Is LSU going to be a playoff team? Mm-hmm. Is Ole Miss going to be a playoff team? Like that top kind of 6 teams is really what I'm looking at of, are they playoff teams, and 2, are they like legit playoff teams that can make a run?
Yeah.
So I think that's what's ultimately going to shape this playoff the most, because last one we didn't see as good SEC teams as we're used to seeing.
Irish English, speaking of Penn State's schedule, he says they should get a complimentary box of Charmin Extra Soft toilet paper after their token 10 or 11 wins this year. In or out?
I think that I have to be in on this. I think that they should make a Charmin Soft bowl game and invite
and let Penn State play in it.
Invite the top 2 teams with the easiest schedules.
And we're going to talk more about that in rapid fire, but I'm totally in on this for sure. Irish English also says Jesse hosting a sports gambling spinoff podcast. In or out?
I'd be in on that, but that'd just be more time that I don't necessarily have right now. Maybe in a little bit, but I would want to do that. I have a group chat of friends, and literally all we talk about is sports betting. So like we could bring that to podcast, and that's where I would go with it.
ND for life. We in or we out. Indy versus OKC being the least interesting and worst covered NBA finals of the last 10 years.
I'm out on that. I still think it's interesting. I can't necessarily comment too much on the coverage, and I'll be honest with you. I just these late starts. Getting up at 5:30 every day. I can't keep my eyes open past 10 or 10:15, and so there's some nights where I just fall asleep, and I'm like, I wake up in the morning. I'm like, oh, I see how this one ended.
Yeah.
So I think it's personally my lack of ability to stay awake, to be honest with you, but I still find it to be very interesting.
I think they're two really good teams and two really like the pace of play. Like to me, it's actually a very entertaining product. That like two of the three games have been very close. Obviously, the middle game, the game 2 that OKC won, was much less competitive. I will say this though, like I sat there and I spent a lot of time thinking about this today. I can't remember the last finals. You might have to go all the way back to the 1970s where you don't have an already, like a true superstar playing for at least one of the teams. Like Halliburton and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are both really good, but I don't consider either one of them superstars yet. And they're obviously small market teams, so that's, that hurts the interest in this. But I can't like look at the, like you had Doncic a couple years ago, and you had Joker, and like at least one of the two teams forever has had a superstar, and you don't have that in this year's finals. And I do think that hurts some of the interest as well. Because like when it was Golden State, Golden State obviously not considered big market, but you had Steph, and then you had Durant, and you had, a dynastic kind of run that you had there. Plus they were going up against LeBron and Cleveland. So a lot different, even though those are theoretically two small market teams that don't typically have as much interest, but because you had superstars playing for both sides, there was a lot more interest as a result. Domer Grizz, there's more risk that CJ Carr will struggle in his first start on the road, no less, compared to the defense struggling to adapt in their first game under Chris Ash as he adjusts back to calling plays for the first time in years. In or out on that?
So basically what this question is asking, is there more risk in CJ Carr? Is there more risk in Chris Ash, is the way that I'm understanding it.
First game, for both of them.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I would say that I'm in on this. There is more risk on CJ Carr just because like CJ Carr is in control of the whole offense. Everything goes, he touches the ball every time.
Mm-hmm.
I think defensively there's more to fall back on, essentially, if something were to go wrong. Like a defensive approach is more so as the all 11 pieces are out there to come together as a unit, right? And so unless Chris Ash is just calling a miserable game and putting them in bad spots, like it's harder for him to have an impact comparatively to CJ Carr. Like CJ Carr could open the wrong way and not hand the ball off. He could throw an interception. He could fumble a snap. Like there's just so many more potential things that can go wrong in I think CJ Carr's game than there could be Chris Ash. And to top this all off, this is CJ Carr's first start.
Right.
Chris Ash has still been around the block. He's hasn't been around the block at Notre Dame.
He was a coordinator for a national championship team. He's called a lot of games in his past. And I think to a large extent, even though offenses obviously evolve and defenses evolve along with it, it's still a much more of a been there, done that thing for Chris Ash. It's not like he's out there. I mean, that's why he's here, because of his defensive coordinator experience. So it's not like this is the first time he's been through it. It is going to be the first time CJ Carr has been through it, or Kenny Minchie, if you prefer, whatever. But in either case, whether it's Carr or Minchie, it's the same situation. First time starting quarterback, and they're all going to be experiencing those things in a game, a real game, big setting, primetime TV, hostile environment, and the whole thing. They're going to be experiencing it for the first time. So much more risk for the quarterback from that aspect. Question 2, Miami's team is built in such a way as to take advantage of whichever your answer was to number 1 above. in or out on that. So, I mean, are
I'm
you
out on
saying,
this. I got
yeah,
this.
I'm
I got this.
okay. Okay.
I'm out on this. I don't think Miami has a defense built to shut down CJ Carr.
Not only CJ Carr, but that the offensive line and the running game that
Right.
comes along with it.
If anything,
They're
they're
not
more
built
of
to
an
shut down
offensively built
everything.
team.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think that's how this I think that whoever posed this question, Domer Grizz, thought that we would say Chris Ash is more of a liability, and that the team Miami is built
Could take
around a good
advantage of it.
offense to take
Yeah.
advantage of Chris Ash. But I'm gonna be completely honest with you. Carson Beck is mid, and he's not going to be better than Ward at the end of the day. And I just
Look at
don't see this offense being as dynamic as they were last year.
yeah. I mean, he's better than DJ Uiagalelei, but look, people thought that DJ was going to go to Florida State last year and like resurrect his career and end up being an NFL draft pick. And look what
Bad
happened
habits are
there.
bad habits no matter
Yeah.
where you go.
Right. Right. And excuse me, I think Carson Beck has enough bad habits, and he's not going to have the same kind of talent around him by any stretch of the means that he had at Georgia. And so I think he'll have a good season, and Miami will have a decent season. But I don't think in that first game that like Carson Beck is just going to shred Notre Dame's secondary when that's going to be one of the strengths of the team going into that game.
I
in the
love
season.
this. We are Wolf comment that was just in the chat. This team will be known for running at will. Regular season will be a blood bath. I have
I
no
like that.
problem with that approach.
No.
Especially the young quarterback. Establish your dominance. Let the easy passing game open up, and then
Big bully offensive line.
Yeah,
Yep.
then you just really like the way I envision these games is for the first quarter and a half, you establish your run. The middle part of the game, you start to air it out, and then the last quarter to quarter and a half, you throw on the brakes and you feed them the run game again. Like that would be the perfect. You start out by punching them with the run game. You body jab them the rest of the game with your passing game, and then you start throwing some haymakers at the end with your running game again.
Double R 2.0, in or out, 2 more silent commits during this weekend. Like
I wish I knew.
I know that they, it's like got a lot of big recruits and stuff coming in. I'll say sure, but I'm just, us. We're not the recruiting guys. So sorry. Indy for life, we in or we out. Since only one player from each school can get in, we in or we out on Todd Light or Manti Te'o getting into this year's College Football Hall of Fame. Now, I did see this question this afternoon, and I was looking up. I don't see anywhere that only one player from a school can get in a given year. I had never heard that. Has anyone heard that this is like an actual hard, fast rule?
Well, let's just play along because I'm going Manti Te'o.
You're going to go Manti over Todd Light?
Just because Manti was my guy, like that was I was, going through high school. Notre Dame went to that national championship. Like those were the glory days, like I wore number 5, Manti wore number 5. We were both great in the run game, probably mediocre in the pass game. Somehow he ended up with interceptions. I never ended up with interceptions. But yeah, I mean, like again, when you're talking about reliving the glory days of football and your fandom for Notre Dame, like Manti Te'o was that guy for me.
Vince and I talked about this a little bit in rapid fire yesterday. And as I said, Todd Light was a 2-time All-American who played for Notre Dame's last national championship team. There is zero, and also, by the way, he won a Super Bowl once he got to the NFL. Not that matters.
This is
for
the college Hall of Fame.
Let me finish. Not that matters for College Football Hall of Fame induction, but a 2-time All-American, the minimal requirement to be in the Hall of Fame is to be an All-American. He's a 2-time All-American and part of a national championship team. And he was a first-round NFL draft pick. There is zero reason Todd Light should not already be in the College Football Hall of Fame. So let's just make that clear. He should be in right now. And if anybody had any sense, he would be in when they cast their votes. Now, that said, as I said yesterday with Manti, can you tell me how many middle linebackers were runner-up for the Heisman Trophy.
Right.
And close enough to a quarterback where, like, breathing down his neck to win the Heisman Trophy, plus all the other awards. He won the only major award that Manti did not win in 2012 that he was eligible for was the Heisman. He won like 6 or 7 other major awards. Like, go down the list. He won everything except the Heisman that he was eligible for as a middle linebacker, again, for a team that played in a national championship game. So, like, more people are definitely going to remember Manti's career than Todd Light's career, unfortunately, at this point. So if I have to pick one of the two, it would be Manti, but Todd Light should absolutely be in the College Football Hall of Fame right now, yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, in that 2000 and that's the answer. They both deserve to be in, but if I'm forced to pick one, I have to go, Manti Te'o. He was a consensus, unanimous All-American. He received All-American honors from the Associated Press, the Walter Camp, Sports Illustrated, and he won awards like you were talking about, the Maxwell, the Chuck
Bednarik,
the
Bronco Nagurski,
the Lombardi,
yes.
The Nagurski. Like, that's a lot, and like you said, for a middle linebacker, for all of that. So I don't know. It's just, I wish I could have saw Todd Light play, but unfortunately I didn't. And like you said, both guys deserve to be in, but I think that there's just some relatively like recency bias, and that would favor Manti.
Right. It's just nuts to me that 3.5 decades have gone by and Todd Light's not in the College Football Hall of Fame today. That makes zero sense to me. Josh, in or out, Boubacar Traore will end up getting more snaps than Jordan Botelho. I will be in on this. I think
I'll be in on this too. He's younger, he's faster, he's more dynamic, he's more twitchy. There's more upside. Like, go down the list. I'm not trying to bash my man Jordan. I know he's had a tough career, the injuries. I think he'll still get his this year, but I think Traore will be more impactful and just be a guy that you can't take off the field.
I agree. I totally agree. They're both going to play a lot. But I think that Boubacar, just that twitchiness, man, he's going to be out there. He's going to be out there quite a bit. Other question from Josh. KK Smith ends up getting passed up on the depth chart by either Will Pauling or Cam Williams. Now, technically, KK Smith plays the Z. Jordan Faison and Elijah Burris are probably ahead of him based on spring performance. The X receivers are Fields, Gilbert, Cam Williams, Bettis Jr. The F receiver, the slot, is Greathouse, Pauling, and Saldate. So technically, like, he's not getting passed up by either one of those guys, but in all likelihood, like those guys that you mentioned, I don't know about Cam Williams, but Will Pauling is definitely going to play quite a bit. Cam Williams.
I think it's funny that he mixed up his name, by the way. He put Paul Willing, and you still read it the right way.
Oh, did I? Yeah, he did. He put Paul Willing, and I said Will Pauling. Yeah,
you said it the right way, which was very impressive. I'm gonna put it like
maybe I'm just dyslexic and I didn't realize it.
I think passed up, like you were saying, is a tough question. I'll just go playing time, and I think both of these guys get more playing time than KK Smith this season.
Yeah, that I would be in on that. That's kind of what I was trying to allude to.
As long as we all know that Greathouse will be at the bottom of the depth chart.
Oh, you're trying to jostle Salty now?
I think that Will Pauling will take over Greathouse's starting role.
Something happened here. There was a second page, and I'm unable to find it. So let me take this out real quick, and let me see if I can get the second part of this thread. Not sure what's going on here. Maybe I'm getting locked out.
IB and the technical difficulties today.
Yeah, it is. It's trying to lock me out now for some reason, even though I was already in. Okay.
Intruder.
Here we go. We'll get back here.
Intruder.
And now you know the rest of the story. Okay. T-Shoop 11. We in and we out. The Leprechaun should be in the student section, should always be a redhead. I think you would have some issues with, who could actually perform the
Yeah, but
task.
just dye your hair red. If you know you're going to be the leprechaun, then just go full. Like, I think the leprechaun should assume full
Well, it's funny
appearance.
because I was actually, like most of the leprechauns have the beard, right? Like they do the beard without the mustache, like the leprechaun. But the guy who was the leprechaun the last couple of years, you may have seen him, very baby faced, and can't actually grow the beard. So what's more important, the beard, the red head, or just that they actually go out and do a good job?
I think doing a good job is the most important part.
I think so too.
But I think you could have fun with trying to enhance the overall leprechaun look.
Have a lot of bad dye jobs, I think, at that point.
If you don't naturally look like a leprechaun, maybe you get a wig, maybe you take some extra testosterone and poof out a beard. I don't know.
Yeah, Joe said the last one went to his son's grade school, St. Patrick's in Omaha. I met him a couple years ago. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but we talked about the fact that he's from Omaha and I was from Kansas and all that kind of good stuff.
Here we go.
Salty did put something in here regarding StreamYard. After very careful consideration, I've come to the conclusion your new system sucks. Yes. All right.
And that's the official end.
Well, apparently that's it. Just two on page 2 of the thread. But Salty got something in there at the end. All right. Great questions today for We In, We Out. Much appreciated. We went deep into a lot of different things today. But Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready.
This is where we get to take some people to task, potentially, depending on which way you go with some of this kind of stuff. So, both USC and Penn State fans are kind of making a sport these days out of knocking Notre Dame's 2025 football schedule. Most Notre Dame fans disagree with the take that the Irish schedule is soft, but we've had a few, at least, on the Premium Champions Lounge, where we had all the We In, We Out questions, who agree that Notre Dame's schedules in recent years are not that great. So, Jesse, where do you stand on this?
So, I feel like there's a couple questions within the question.
Okay.
I think on paper, it is a really idiotic idea to judge a team's schedule before the season has started. You never know what these teams are going to turn out to be. All you can do is put them on the schedule and hope that you have enough premier matchups, middle, matchups, and what you would probably consider lower tier matchups. And you hope that your low tier to middle tier turn out as best as possible, right? Like, you can't control last year, if Florida State was on the schedule, them having that abysmal season. You did your job by
going
putting
into
Florida
the season.
State.
Everyone thought they were going to be a lot better than what they turned out to be.
They thought that was a playoff team, the ACC champion. And so I completely agree that you should, analyze the schedule, but let's do that after the season. And then to answer the second part of your question, I do agree that there is if there are Notre Dame fans out there who feel a certain type of way about Notre Dame's schedule in the past couple of years, I would have to agree. I understand that 6 or 7 of your games are going to be the ACC. One of them is going to be Navy, and you're hoping that, Southern Cal stays. But what are they doing outside of those games? I don't need Tennessee State, Bowling Green, Miami of Ohio, Marshall, Ball State. Like, I think that it's okay to maybe have one of those teams, but when you get into multiple MAC schools,
I mean, last year was an anomaly.
A little frustrated.
Yeah, last year was an anomaly. Obviously, it was probably the worst Notre Dame schedule of the last 50 or 60 years. I would have to imagine. Like when you look at 2 MACs and 2 service academies being on there, so basically, like it was not good. But do you want to win and compete for national championships, or do you want a schedule that's a murderer's row? That's Like, why would you overschedule? Like Notre Dame's schedule is balanced enough. At like this year's schedule
They've got
is
enough meat on the.
yeah. There's definitely enough meat. And like if I'm comparing it to Southern Cal and to Penn State, who I'm talking about, Southern Cal opens the season against Georgia or Missouri State and Georgia Southern. Penn State's first 3 games are Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova. I'm sorry, but Purdue is probably the only team on Notre Dame's schedule that could be worse than any of those 5 teams right there. And USC and Penn State fans are trying to point at Notre Dame's schedule and say it's soft. But of course USC plays Purdue as well. So, so like what's their case there? Like all these Big Ten teams think that they have these brutal schedules because they're in the Big Ten, but it is just not the case. USC has Notre Dame, Oregon, and then Illinois as its 3rd best team. I don't even know who its 4th best team is. Rutgers, maybe? Nebraska, maybe? Like, I have no idea. Penn State has Oregon, Ohio State, and then Indiana is its 3rd best team. But do any of us really think that Indiana is going to be what they were last year? And actually, Nebraska and Rutgers are on Penn State's schedule. But, still, like when you look at USC. So, like, Notre Dame has Miami, Texas A&M, Boise State. Will Boise State be what they are or were last year? Probably not, but they're still year in and year out, literally for the last almost 20 years now, the best group of 5 team that there is consistently. And then they've got USC, Arkansas. Like, is USC better than Arkansas? I don't know. But when you look at the schedule on balance that Notre Dame has, you've got 2 SEC schools, 2 Big Ten schools, the best group of 5 of the last 20 years that just went to the college football playoff, 6 ACC teams, and Navy. Like, that's a very comparable schedule to either of the schedules and still tougher than either USC or Penn State or most of the rest of the Big Ten, for that matter, except Purdue, because Purdue keeps getting screwed playing the toughest schedule the last couple of years since they expanded.
Yeah, I mean, the Big Ten is very top heavy, and then they get credit for the rest of the conference playing those games. Like, oh, we're playing Big Ten games. It's like, oh, I don't care about you playing crappy Maryland.
Yeah.
Like,
the Big Ten is helping its best teams with the schedules that they're giving.
Right.
Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and even USC for that matter. They're trying to help USC. I mean, USC's got Michigan. What's Michigan going to be? We don't know.
Well, and the thing that I guess, like Notre Dame, here's how I break it down. Notre Dame plays that ACC chunk that they play. It's yes, there's some duds in there, but most of the time, like they're playing Clemson every year, who is really good. They're playing Duke, who is predominantly pretty good every other year. North Carolina, who was on the schedule, is pretty solid. Pittsburgh, pretty solid. Playing at Virginia Tech, pretty solid. Like, I would take Notre Dame's ACC schedule over playing those bottom feeder Big Ten schools, and then you throw in that, okay, they got Arkansas on the schedule, Boise State on the schedule, USC on the schedule. That's a SEC team. That's a group of 5 champion last year. That's USC, who everyone thinks is, going to be at the top of the Big Ten now. So I don't know. Like, again, I don't mind Notre Dame's schedule. The only time I get mad is when basically those 3 out of conference games, like you mentioned for Penn State, when Notre Dame kind of has something similar between like 2 MACs and Tennessee State, or you know what I mean? Like, I'm cool with maybe 1 or 2 tight MAC teams per year. Outside of that, I think it's too much.
By the way, Notre Dame is the only Power 5 team playing Boise State this year. Like, and with Boise State getting to the playoff last year, like traditionally they've had a hard time getting Power 5 teams to schedule them. And I think it's going to be tougher, if they keep making some playoff appearances every year, but people want to call Notre Dame's schedule soft when they went out and scheduled them last year before they even knew they were going to be a playoff team. So fill in the blank. ESPN released its ACC predicted order of finish for the upcoming season, and it's blank. They have Notre Dame's season opening opponent, Miami, picked number 1 with Clemson at number 2.
It's delusional. Miami's losing their best player in Cam Ward. They lost some of their wide receivers were even drafted, I'm pretty sure, or made NFL rosters or training camps. long story short, Miami's going to be worse than last year, and Clemson's going to be better. Clemson added Tom Allen as defensive coordinator, obviously Penn State's coordinator. I think that Dabo has been doing a good job, kind of climbing back up the mountain after maybe having a couple more down years. He's got an experienced quarterback, whether you like Cade Klubnik or not. He's been there for a while. Their defense is going to be better. I think their offense is going to be more powerful. And Miami's just relying on transfer quarterback Carson Beck, who is coming off a torn UCL in his elbow. Like, there's a lot of more things working against Miami. And, like, Clemson has the track record of the last 10 years. Like, they're consistently good. Their worst season was, what, a 9-win season, an 8-win season? Like, I mean, what are we talking about here? Like, it feels like this is kind of like Florida State of last year. Like, oh, they showed that they can be pretty decent or solid for a year. Let's just jump the expectations now even higher. Like, I'm not buying it. Not buying it.
Feels like it's at least good for Notre Dame going into the season. You got them right out of the gate, and Miami is expected to be as good as they are. How much we'll be able to put on it, who knows? Albert is obviously drinking the orange and green Kool-Aid someplace. He said Miami's going to kill Notre Dame. And again, I go back to a guy who covers Miami, David Lake, when I interviewed him in the month or so back, telling me that he watched Notre Dame's spring game and he felt like, just looking at the guys on the field, which wasn't even the full Notre Dame team, that far and away Notre Dame's roster is going to be better than Miami's. Like, we're talking about who's going to win the ACC. At least right now, it's good for Notre Dame because people think that they're going to, like Craig says, ESPN doesn't do their research. This is all, like FPI and numbers based and all that different kind of stuff. They're like, when I kind of read the breakdown and saw what the numbers were, they're fairly similar. I did find it interesting that they, like in the ranking that they have of returning talent and all that kind of stuff, they mentioned that Miami has 58% of its defense returning. Well, like 58%. So that's what, 6.5 guys or something like that. Like Notre Dame, I think, is at 65% of its returning production, and that's, I don't even know, like, again, like just based on the number that they had, I don't even know if that includes guys like Botelho and Traore, who obviously were hurt for more than half the season. So yeah, I think that like between these two, I was shocked to see Miami at the top of that ACC list because this really feels like, again, like looking at schedules, Clemson has a very favorable schedule, and I would be shocked if they're not at the top of the conference when all is said and done. ESPN also did a top 25 college football ranking based on the trajectory of each program over the course of the next 2 years. Key factors were quarterback continuity, coaching staff, and the trenches being intact. Here's how they rank it. Again, this is top 25 trajectory for the next 2 years. So this would be for like what they think the programs are going to be in 2025 and 2026. Texas is number 1. Ohio State is number 2. Georgia number 3. Oregon number 4. Notre Dame comes in at number 5, followed by Penn State, Clemson, LSU, Tennessee, and then Alabama at number 10. So you good with where Notre Dame slots in at number 5 on this?
Yeah, I am good with Notre Dame being at number 5. I think as long as you're in kind of this top 10 list, you have something to feel good about. Like, I'm not going to get into the semantics of, oh, Notre Dame deserves to be 2 or 1 or 3 or 5. I think as long as you're in this conversation, I feel good about that. And the reason why I wouldn't necessarily throw them all the way to the top is you just don't know about the quarterback thing yet. And obviously that's a big part of this list, but they have a lot of solidity elsewhere. They, in their coaching staff, their trenches are great. Obviously, we've talked about, their run game and defense. So Notre Dame is in a really good place, in my opinion. And I feel very confident about them being at 5 and again, just being in this kind of top 10 overall.
Yeah, I mean, look, 2 of the 3 teams who are ahead of them, I guess 2 of the 4 teams who are ahead of them have won national championships within the last 3 years. Texas has been in the playoff each of the last 2 years. Oregon just made it to the playoff. I would probably quibble a little bit. Again, it's splitting hairs, 4 versus 5. Who really cares? But I think that the bigger picture is Notre Dame is number 5 on this list. And if they live up to that over the next 2 years, that means, going back to a question that we had from Trevor in We In or We Out in terms of, how you would feel if they didn't make the college football playoff semifinal this year. If you're number 5, then you're going to be at a minimum contending to be in the semifinals every year, if not the national championship game. So you're feeling pretty good about that. And if you have the other things right, the quarterback, the trenches, the coaching staff, you're going to win more games than not, just like last year. So I think you got to be feeling really good to be Notre Dame at number 5 on a list like this. Just the way the program is perceived and what people are seeing, the national perception of the Notre Dame program is right up there with the elite programs in college football right now. And also 3 spots ahead of that guy down on the Bayou, by the way. Is there anything else on this list when you look at the top 10 that catches your eye?
Yeah, I think that there were two, well, maybe 3 things that caught my eye. I'm not sold on Oregon being at 4, to be honest with you.
I agree with that, especially like when you look at quarterback continuity. I think there's a lot to be shown there.
I think there's a big turnover in talent in coming soon in Oregon. And I love, is it Lanning, Dan Lanning? I think he's a great coach and they have the right guy. I just don't know if they can continue to recruit and fill those big position needs like you were talking about, specifically at the quarterback level. The next would be, and again, this isn't just because it's Brian Kelly. I just don't buy LSU being at number 8 when they haven't even gotten into the playoffs yet with Brian Kelly or an SEC championship, or like what accolades has LSU won since their national championship?
Seems a little high. I know they had a good transfer portal offseason and all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't necessarily play into the trajectory for the next couple of years, and again, like for them to be sitting at number 8, I think is pretty significant. I think Alabama sitting all the way down at number 10, like, I've said it before. Kalen DeBoer is a good coach, just like Brian Kelly is a good coach, like a good developmental coach. But can Caleb DeBoer, can he recruit at the level that Nick Saban was able to recruit? I think that, like he largely did it with a group at Washington that was intact. Like I said, good coach. And he also played in a worse conference. How's he going to do at Alabama? I think that Alabama at number 10, 1, it catches my eye, but 2, I think it's also deserving because I do think that a program like Tennessee in their own conference has passed them up at this point where they are right now, sort of a crossroads for what's going on in the SEC. So Albert was chiming in about the whole Miami and he said, if you think CJ Carr in his first start is going to win against Carson Beck, just stop. Just a second before you jump in. I'll let you have your chance because I know that you were ready. But we heard all last summer. We spent 3 months last summer with Texas A&M fans jumping in here and telling us about the butt whooping that Texas A&M was going to put on Notre Dame in a road game, and their quarterback was so great, and this and that and everything. How'd that play out? How'd it play out? Who was in the national championship game last year? Now that doesn't get you anything when you go into a new season, but we've all seen CJ Carr up close and personal. Now we also, for a week after Notre Dame beat Indiana in the first round of the college football playoff last year, for a week we had Georgia fans telling us they were going to be better off without Carson Beck against Notre Dame.
And then
how'd that
after
work
was
out?
all the excuses.
How'd that work out? Yes. So what has Miami won at this point, Albert, that makes you so confident that they're going to lay this butt whooping on a team that just played for the national championship last year?
I love Toonce's comment. Can we start talking about the heat and humidity?
Yes.
That's other people's favorite topic is, oh, Notre Dame's never played in this kind of heat. How are they going to fare in this kind of heat?
Albert says it's going to get ugly real fast. Yeah, and not probably the way that you want it to get real ugly.
So just to kind of get down to the root of his little argument here, fortunately for CJ Carr, he's got just a plethora of resources around him. He's got probably the Heisman front runner as a running back right now, Jeremiah Love. He's got a really good, talented offensive line. He's got Eli Raridan is going to make a huge jump this year, according to Mike Denbrock. He's got wide receivers that are on the up and coming. Then you go to the defensive side of the ball. He's got a great, defense on that side of the ball that can slow the game down. And he's got a better head coach. Marcus Freeman is a better head coach. He's got a better offensive coordinator. Mike Denbrock won a Heisman with Jaden Daniels and led a very potent offense down at LSU. And now he's got a quarterback that better fits his system. So I think Notre Dame's going to be better with CJ Carr at the end of the day.
I think a lot of people do at the end of the day. But he's unproven. People like Albert haven't seen him. Okay, he thinks that Miami's roster is more talented. And like Toonsis says, they couldn't win last year. They couldn't even get into the ACC championship game last year with a guy that won the Heisman and was the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. But they're loaded with talent on that roster. I'm not saying they're talentless, but I think the state of Notre Dame's roster is in much better shape than Miami's.
And their coaching staff.
All right. I mean, Albert, if you want to just put a wager on it right now, we'd be happy to accept that. We take super chats. If you want to put a sawbuck or two on that. By the way, super chat earlier from Illmatic, in or out. The SEC goes 5 years without a title, counting the last 2 years.
I think they're going to win one with Arch at some point in the next 3 years, so I'll be out on this. I think Texas is going to get one. I think Arch Manning is going to be their savior.
I do too. That's like you talk about a loaded roster. That's a loaded roster, and they've got, a legit quarterback now as well. Oh, excuse me. Having a little hiccup action.
Don't get started on that mute button.
New Indianapolis Colts owner Carly Ursay-Gordon likes to be on the sideline wearing a headset while holding a coach's call sheet during games. Here's her rationale. Quote, I need to be able to say, is this person full of BS? Do they even know what they're talking about? I would suggest it for anyone else who has to pay head coaches and GMs millions and millions of dollars. It helps you make a less expensive mistake, end quote. Some are calling this heavy micromanaging. Others think that this is a great idea. Where do you stand on this, Jesse?
Yeah, I actually am in favor of this idea because, you at the end of the day, you are the owner, right? And we're we're fans of a franchise where the owner wants to be the GM and he wants to be all these things, right? Luckily for the Colts, they have an owner that steps away, right? And so how do you step away but still feel like you have a grasp on what's going on? Because you're still making big decisions of, who to pay, who to hire, who to fire, all of those things. And so I think when it comes down to it at the end of the season or maybe after a game and, the coach is saying, well, I needed more from the player. And the player's like, well, I don't necessarily agree with the play call and we're not maximizing my potential and ability. Well, how do you have a gauge on how to determine who's right or wrong? Essentially, at the end of the day, you throw on the headset and you might not be making calls and you might not have input, but you at least know what's going on and you can hear the decision-making process. And so when things come back to you at the end of the day, you could say, well, I heard that decision being made live time and I don't necessarily agree for X, Y, and Z. And so I have managers who sit on meetings who don't even turn on their camera or on mute the entire time, but they're just kind of there to make sure things are kind of, going along and nothing major is essentially coming up. And again, probably the same thing where if something goes wrong in design, they can be like, well, I remember on this call, you specifically told this person to do this. So it kind of traces back to you at the end of the day. And so I don't mind it. It's not like she's giving her input. She's just saying, I need to have receipts
Exactly.
if something goes wrong.
At the end of the year, a head coach is always going to be reviewed. Like, I would assume that they're going to sit down with the owner, the general manager. They're going to have conversations about how things went. You know, what do you think went right? What do you think went wrong? What would you have done differently? All that kind of stuff. And if the owner is tuned in because she's literally listening to the way that the coach is dealing with things when it matters on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays, you know, like listening to what's going on, seeing the call sheet, as long as she's not, you know, in there after every game, second guessing and doing those kind of things.
Right.
That we don't know, because obviously Jim Irsay was the owner. This is his daughter. So like, she hasn't had that kind of control yet, but she apparently has been wearing the headset, so she knows what's going on. So I like it, because like, it's the complete opposite of a detached owner watching from the luxury suite and doing it that way, you know, and then trying to make the calls and second guessing and those kind of things. And I agree with what Tommy's, as long as she's not actually interjecting. But then again, she is the owner, so it's her prerogative to do whatever she wants, just like that owner you were talking about, Jesse. We'll get to that here in a minute, by the way. But first, Indiana Pacers radio play-by-play announcer Mark Boyle allowed Pacers TV announcer Chris Denary to call the second quarter of last night's game on the radio during the NBA Finals. Rate that move, scale of 1 to 10.
I'm going to rate it from my perspective.
Okay.
Honestly, I have to give this a 1 out of 10.
Wow.
I'm not on board with this, because to me, it's like, so the radio guy did this the entire season. At what point did the TV guy come on and be like, hey man, you never get TV time. Why don't you come
do a TV game with me?
TV game with me. But now that it's playoff time, but TV guy doesn't get to be on TV anymore, he still wants to feel important and relevant. So now he's getting the sympathy invite to come on and do the radio game. I guess that's my whole point, is where was TV guy at for radio guy the entire regular season?
Did he ever give him a shot to do a TV game?
That's what I mean.
Point?
But now that the games, now that we're in the NBA Finals and the games are the most important they've ever been, now TV guys like, yeah, man, let me come on and do come do the radio game with you. That's the only part where I'm like, and again, I don't know how the conversation went, but looking at it on paper, those were kind of my initial thoughts.
Who hurt you, Jesse? Who hurt you when you were young? Huh? Who hurt you? Who made you so callous? Who made you this way? Who did this to you? This is a 10 out of 10. Now, this is now, like, we don't have this kind of thing at the college level, obviously, because it's, like whatever TV is going to be, like network TV that, that's going to be there. But like professional sports, specifically, basketball, hockey, baseball, you have both local TV and radio announcers. That's part of the reason that Len Casper, you remember when he left Cubs TV a few years back, he kind of thought he was jumping on the right wagon when the White Sox were still looking like they were going to be competitive. He made the move from Cubs TV to White Sox radio because he wanted the opportunity to call a World Series one day. He knew he wasn't going to get it as a TV guy. So to me, this is a 10 out of 10. Like the radio guy, all he did was give up one quarter during the NBA Finals. Literally at this point, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You don't know if the Pacers are ever going to be there again. Neither of these guys has been in that situation before. So I think it's really cool that he did this. Obviously, they are more friends than rivals, that he was willing to give up a little bit of his own airtime and let the TV guy jump in there and have the opportunity to call an NBA Finals game. We're going to have to do some digging and find out why Jesse is so callous right now.
I'm callous because Albert just said that Miami's recruiting is 10 times better than Notre Dame, but every list I've seen from the last 10 years has Notre Dame ahead of Miami. That's why I'm callous. All these freaking jabronis that come in here and just, if you're going to come in here and be a jabroni, at least have your facts straight. I feel like that's rule number one. Don't just be spitting non-valid facts out of the side of your mouth.
I mean, the delusional thing is one thing, and I easily could have like just hit the mute button, like a while ago, put him in timeout or
It's
whatever,
fun
but
to
I
see
kind of
these things play out a little
let
bit.
him stick around. But like, come on, Albert, like you're just kind of you're showing your own weaknesses at this point. Like, you got to be on your game if you're going to interact, and I feel like you're missing a couple, maybe a couple drinks on South Beach. I don't know. Fill in the blank. The postseason Pacers guard Tyrese Halliburton has had is blank.
Big moment clutch. Like, I saw a chart the other day. I love my charts. Halliburton has been the most clutch postseason player of all time. Of all time. Like, this singular postseason run is better than anyone else's singular postseason run in terms of clutchness. Like, beating LeBron's 2016, beating Reggie Miller's postseason run with the Pacers. Like, he is the most clutch player when it matters most. Like, you don't often see that. Like, most of the time you see clutchness when it's a regular season game, or it's we're beating a crappy team, they got to come back and win. No, he's doing this in the most important games against the best teams, which is why it's just like he doesn't put up crazy stats every night. He's not putting up 30 pieces and 40 pieces, and he might occasionally, but he's more or less like a 15 point, 20 point, 10 assist kind of guy. But whenever you need a big bucket at the end of the game, or you need to go on a run in the fourth quarter, who is leading it every time? It's Halliburton.
He's had a star-making postseason is what he's had, because like to people, like more like you who follow the game really closely, like you knew who Tyrese Halliburton was. I know who Tyrese Halliburton is because of the fact that I live in Indiana. Not, and not that I'm watching more Pacers games or anything like that, but like, especially since Caitlin Clark has been there for the last year plus, it's like they've got two really young stars
right now.
And like, it feels like this is for Halliburton. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that the Indiana Pacers are going to become like the Golden State Warriors of the next 5 or 6 years or something like that, but it's fairly similar, like to where Steph Curry was in his career. It took him a few years to get to that point before the Warriors actually elevated and he became that star, when he won the championship. And Halliburton is doing the same kind of stuff right now, especially considering what you're talking about, the fact that he does it in the clutch, the way he does it, like the shot against Cleveland where, like he's in the lane and he backs out and he hits the three from straight away. And then, like the bouncing shot, and all that, against the Knicks and, all the way through. Like the guy is just the end of the, the game one, just inside the arc with the game-winning shot in the whole thing. It's a star-making run that he's having right now. Like this, like I was saying before, neither team right now has a superstar, but he's obviously I think he's becoming a superstar in the making, especially if he can carry them to a championship against, I mean, he's already beaten two teams. Well, I guess not two. He's beaten one so far, Cleveland, that at least with record and what they did during the regular season was supposed to be better. Now, again, they're a team without a superstar as well, but like OKC, even better team. And if he can carry Indiana past them, I think that, he puts himself in a different echelon. Tommy's saying is there's nothing else to talk about other than basketball. Literally, he said, it's barely
it's the
a sport.
NBA Finals.
He would take tennis. It's the NBA Finals, and it's the middle of June, Tommy. And it's like,
well, isn't this the guy who's
32 minutes into rapid fire at this point?
Isn't this the guy who's always the sports talk police too? When other people are in here, why are we talking about this? And every time Tommy goes, guys, it's the sports talk show. Can we not talk about all sports other than Notre Dame football? Oh, I know what I was going to ask you too to wrap up this Pacers question, just because I know people are going to love it. Did you know that you knew so many Pacers fans?
No.
I love seeing all these Pacer posts on my
They've
social media now.
come out of the woodwork, haven't they?
I was like, I never knew you even liked basketball, let alone you're a Pacers fan.
Jesse, the other day, we had a listener tell me, please don't talk about the Cowboys. So this is the first show you've been on since then. So, of course, we're going to talk about the Cowboys today. That's how we're going to close the show. Netflix has announced the premiere date for its upcoming Jerry Jones docuseries, America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys, August 19th. Scale of 1 to 10, how much are you looking forward to that?
You know, as much as we criticize Jerry Jones and his antics as a owner, he's still a tremendous businessman, and he knows how to market the Dallas Cowboys. It's going to be a 10 out of 10 for me, and the main reason this is going to be a 10 out of 10 for me is because this is going to be about when the Cowboys were good, when they actually won a lot, when they were the most popular team in the country.
Right.
The glory days. I've not seen any of this.
The poster is Aikman, Emmett, Irvin. It's the triplets and Jerry Jones is what they're using to market it. So
of course I'm going to watch, because one, I'm a Cowboys fan, and two, they're going to recap all of the good stuff that I never got to be a part of. So I'm going to love it. It's like the Hard Knocks, like when I knew that Jerry would put on a show, and they weren't going to be very good, but I was still going to be tuned into Hard Knocks at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I would say 9 out of 10. I am curious, like, how much influence Jerry has over this. Is it going to be, like a very pro Jerry type thing? Is all it's going to do is sing his praises? Like, how much praise is Jimmy Johnson going to get? How much credit is Jimmy Johnson going to get in any of this? So I am kind of wondering about that. But look, it's our team, and I'm going to watch when it's all said and done. So I'm very looking forward to it, but I am curious just how much bluster comes out of this whole thing, because it's Jerry Jones at the end of the day. I'm gonna let you make the call on this. Mike says, sorry, but SGA, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, is a superstar. Do you buy or sell that, Jesse? You are much more the NBA fan than me. I would say star, not quite superstar.
I would say going into this season, no. I think once this season ends, you could potentially say yes.
Because he's the MVP.
MVP, could win the fight. Like,
if they win the championship, yeah.
He's been on the brink of being, like, I would say people kind of knew he had the talent at some point to do it, but like, this is the first year where he's finally kind of taken the bulls by the horn and been like, I'm going to be a star player, basically. And he won the MVP, and he could win the NBA Finals. And I think those are things that help you establish your role as a superstar in the NBA. But going into this season and currently, I would not deem him a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, like the guy we were just talking about, Halliburton has been the biggest star of these playoffs. And I put them fairly close. SGA is a better player, but like in terms of like star power, I think that they're fairly equal. And right now, Halliburton's star is brighter. They're fairly equal because of the fact that they play in small markets, Oklahoma City and Indianapolis. And so that definitely works against them. But, like if you put the uniforms of even Dallas and like the Knicks on these players, I think the perception of this series is a lot different. Don't you? Like the Oklahoma City and Indianapolis?
Oh, yeah, I completely agree.
I do as well. I was wondering this as well, Jesse. We haven't seen DK in a while. Everything okay with him? Anybody know like what's going on with
he must be in divorce court or something.
You didn't have to go there. All right, we're going to wrap it up with that. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate the questions in, we out earlier today. And hit the like button before you leave. Say goodbye to your old friend Albert as you leave as well. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.